Hi, everybody. It's Michelle from Rock the World. I'm here with Kay. It is Kay and Michelle rocking the world, and we're talking about fatigue and development. I'm Michelle Turner of Movement Lesson, and this is Kay, Neurodivergent with Kay. We're talking about fatigue and stress, or understanding negotiation of stresses and development. Doing a little bit different this time. I've actually put together a full webinar on the stages of fatigue for you to see different areas where a system, your body, can get too tired to process, or where processing for some is takes a lot more effort than others,
Yeah.
right? And Kay is really going to talk about her successes around it and workabouts. But again, this is just about movement. You're working with your professional team. If for any reason you feel that you need to talk to a professional, that's where you go.
Michelle is 3 weeks post-op. Are you fatigued?
Oh, absolutely. I'm just excited the last 2 days I was able to make it without taking a nap. Because the load negotiation of getting up, like I can't stand up. People think that I am standing up and walking. Yes, I am, but I have to stick my leg out and push through, similar to anyone that's has capacities in managing their muscles and their skeletal system. um, Everything has to be thought of, and I drop the world. Everything just ends up on the floor, and then I have to figure out how to pick it up.
Uh-huh.
So, I don't sleep well because if I roll over, it's my hip. I'm not in any pain. Everything's going great. I'm already back at the gym, but definitely, I have to manage my fatigue on a daily basis still.
Even when I appear still or at rest, my body is still working to maintain posture, movement, communication, and regulation. That constant internal effort is why fatigue is not always visible and why it is often misunderstood.
Correct. And it starts off with early development. Your baby is just managing their movements and they're going in and out of a sleep pattern. There's no set sleep. This is one of the biggest things people try and focus on, is to get a baby to sleep through the night. But they move, fatigue, sleep. They sleep, fatigue, move. You know what I mean? And this is how a baby starts off. And they're literally sleeping probably half their life away because of just moving around and developing is causing them to have fatigue management. Now we learn fatigue management, and this is part of, I think, that the great part about doing this webinar. But some people, because of their bodies taking more effort than normal, uh, fatigue management can't be managed, or it's a very high cost.
My fatigue is rarely caused by one single thing. It reflects how my body has developed and adapted over time. Everything I do builds on previous effort, and fatigue is often the result of many systems working together.
Oh, that's what the body is. This is something that I created. So if your body is at stage one, breathing, balance, and heart functions, everything else is labored. Nobody should wake up and say, "Oh, I'm glad I can balance. Oh, I'm glad I can breathe." Right? These are subconscious forces to many, but not to everybody, right? So balance has been a real hard thing with me. I'm not that I'm going to fall down, but how do I get in and out of positions? So after hip replacement, I went down to severe level one. Um, I have vision function here, but really it's also that and just structure. I blew out my pelvis. I have no structure. I have no transitional skills are starting to happen, but getting in and out of the car and so forth, getting in and out of bed, those are transition skills. Um, and then we go into your rotational milestones. After surgery, that's the biggest no-no. Don't rotate, but people don't bring it back. And that's what part of my rehab has to do with rotation and then into functional movements. So yes, same thing with Kay or what you're going through. If you have to go in and out of these stages, and that's what development is, but it should at some point where you're just really concentrating within this realm of functional movements rotation. Yes, it is much more fatiguing and overstimulating for some, what they call sensory reflexes, all of that. But we're here to look at it. Is a system just stressed in fatigue, and that's why you're more of a startle or jumpy.
Wait, what?
Is it again? Is it your reflex or
And
just your
my
fatigue?
body isn't fully efficient in how it organizes movement and function. I rely on compensation strategies. Those strategies help me participate in the life, but they also require constant energy that adds up over time.
And actually, this is why I think you like horseback riding so much because that you can really feed off the horse's system and it helps organize you. And it's one of the reasons why it's very hippotherapy and or variations of equestrian modeling in with human movement is really a wonderful thing to be at.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just helps you with that. If you were to do these things on your own, let's say without the horse, right? Now you're much more in a compensated system. Whereas with the horse, right, it's stabilizing your efficiency, your vision, and so forth. Uh, that's where the body doesn't get necessarily an easier way to do it, but a more efficient way to do it. And that's what the body likes to feel.
Mm.
Fatigue for me is not just tiredness. It can feel like heaviness in my body, slowed thinking, or increased effort in speaking or moving. It is the experience of my body working harder than what people can see.
Right. Even just as baby and tummy time, and I use it a lot, people think that this is tummy time, but you can just see the struggle and where again the asymmetry of it. And so the legs are kicking, but the baby doesn't know what to do here, right? So we see tummy time as success, where I see this as very fatiguing on the child. Because this is a difference too, is it a milestone or versus a benchmark, right? And this is more effort management here. You can see again how the weight transfer is not there, they're not on their pelvis, and so they want to move, they want to do something, but they're doing it in a very fatiguing way.
What is a benchmark?
So benchmark is an accomplishment. So basically, where I really started to differ with movement lesson, like a benchmark might be degrees of freedom or range of motion. So you'll be able to put your arm out like this. Now, to me, so what? I can't feed my face. I can't dress myself just because I can stick my arm out. It might be a degree of measurement, but I can't fix my hair. I can't do anything with it. I can't read or write. And so when we're looking at a benchmark and you can say, oh, but Johnny can stick their arm out or get the ball in the basket. But again, when my child was young, can they get dressed? Can they walk? Can they say, oh, my stomach hurts? Like, so this is where I started looking all these different areas. When my son looked at me and said, Mom, my stomach hurts every day. And he was 7. Like I didn't, you know what I mean? Like I was trying to take care of him, but when he's nonverbal, you have to look at why he's sitting there like this, because he's just so fatigued because he just doesn't feel good. Right. But the doctors are like, he's fine. No, he wasn't. He had lots of fluid. So my son was sepsis. They were sending me home from the hospital.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I've spent my life compensating in order to function and participate. These strategies allow me to live my life, but they are not effortless. Everything still requires energy, even when it looks smooth from the outside.
In the world of cerebral palsy or neuromuscular disorders, transition failure is the number one area that needs to be worked on in the habilitation process. It's the movement transitions, the environmental changes, posture shifts, sensory changes. I'm not talking about sensory integration overload. I'm talking about, is this too visually complex for a child versus outside or in your home environment? Cognitive switching from a social aspect. Again, you're switching a mode to a child. Recess, what should be like the funnest part of a child's life, for kids with special needs, that's like usually high anxiety area. Ball's gonna fly at me. I can't duck. You know what I mean? Like there's too many ways of dealing it, and
Yeah.
it's social adaptation. So one of the biggest thing is like with recess, that's on an IEP. Like that's not when the aide gets to go take a break.
No.
You can take a break when they're in the classroom and they're more secured environment. But as far as me, recess is really a big IEP area, as an example. So the first thing that I look at is how a child's able to relate to gravity. And really, it's just that for baby born, they're either succumbing to gravity, where gravity looks like they're just being pulled to the ground. You'll see the knees come out, the hands come out. The lots of times too, a wider rib cage because respiratory is more difficult. Or they're just easy. You can pick them up and you can put them down, and you're not like, a baby shouldn't seem heavy. And this is something to look at with your child and what's going on. But a lot of people don't consider gravity as an item of development or a fatigue. But you're born with gravity and you're with it. It's the only non-optional force to the day you die. So when you're just tired and you can't get off the couch, that's when gravity's saying, hello, I'm a little bit harder than usual right now. And that's why when we're sick, we go to bed. We just can't walk around. It's very hard.
Positions, tasks, or environments requires planning and coordination that others may not notice, but my body is already working before the task even begins.
Yep.
On my better days, my body feels more organized and efficient. I can participate more easily, and recovery is less demanding, although energy is still being used in the background.
Oh, that's the whole thing with fatigue. Energy is usually in the background, but also in the foreground. Lots of times we just don't think of how much energy we take. That's why a lot of people have a hard time with the diet. They don't realize, okay, I just ate a burger. How much energy am I using against that burger? We really don't think about energy output, and we don't think about input. And that's why, like again, you might be a little overweight or something. When you see a person with neuromuscular condition, they're usually very skinny because fat doesn't even have a moment to get on their body because they're just burning so much energy on both ends of the candles. Um, you can see this quickly in my deviations. Optimal full-term birth, nothing happened, going into a surgical birth, or it could be full term, but you get into that wait and see, I'm not sure kind of thing. Surgical complications, trauma, you start going into the NICU, and then this most severe being the premature, the micropreemie, and hospitalization times. I really believe in my heart of hearts, any child that's been in the NICU 2 days or more should get some form of early intervention. But again, operating constantly in the deviation 4 is much more fatiguing, let's say, than number 1.
Even when everything looks normal externally, I may already be using more energy internally just to maintain that level of function. This is often where fatigue begins without others noticing.
Right. And that's why I'm trying to do these videos to talk about this, because it I know you're using more energy because of where you are within these scales of fatigue. Whereas again, a lot of people, like I had a client that just got tested, just cerebral palsy, and they were like, can she draw body parts? And I'm just like, Like she
Mm.
can't hold a pencil. Like what, like why are we asking the question? Like why aren't you respecting the parents? Why aren't you respecting the child? I get it that we want to, but you know, and even a 5-year-old is what if they're not being exposed to that kind of drawing anyway, that they could draw body parts, but still the fact that it's kind of obvious that she can't hold a pen yet. And
Mm.
again, that's fatiguing. Um, so we look at the structure here. Structure would be midline, tone, genetics, tone being the high tone, low tone, right? The new body, your child should not work to move. And that's another thing too, like,
Mm.
oh, they just tried a little bit harder. They're going to get this rolling over. No, they see a ball and all of a sudden they're on their belly. Like they just roll. It shouldn't be like, any baby that is that smart to push against a surface or to pull against something to get the job done, to me is a warning sign because it's taking so much more energy. And like you were saying, just to get out of bed, because you can't just roll out of bed, right? You're pushing, you're pulling, or you need assistance.
We have long-term physical and medical stress that has accumulated over time. My fatigue reflects not just today's activity, but years of ongoing demands on my body.
Yeah, and that's called itis. That's overheating. So again, looking at two trauma hierarchy, if the trauma happened in utero, you know what I mean? That's much more severe. Yes, it can happen during birth, and that can be seen as equally severe, but if there's a processing, depending on where you are in the utero, that's a problem. Right now, traumas can happen in the hospital. Right? They can, and even they're trying to save your life or your child's life, it's still trauma. Even just phototherapy for jaundice and how severe the jaundice is. Jaundice is very inflammatory and heavy on the system. I've had people actually come to me and said, I think my child has CP. And I touched them and I was like, did they have jaundice? And they're like, oh my gosh, how did you know? They think I'm psychic. And I'm like, no, it's just what it's done to the back. And then the back can't move. And I can see where you think you have neuromuscular issues, but it's actually from that again. And that NICU phototherapy, we're getting into environment. Some kids are just, again, my baby's not moving much. Well, they're in the car seat. And I'm not saying bad parenting here. I'm just saying that, there is a condition called baby containment system, where a baby is put in devices too much. And then again, the deviations we just talked about. So depending on where your child is, again, in this scale, if it's a birth to utero, and then you're adding in, like, again, you had utero issues, you had birth issues, you had hospital issues, and therefore you had environment issues because you were in the NICU so long. You're already at a heavy trauma hierarchy, not an emotional trauma per se, but a fatiguing, and that's why you're saying it's a lifelong event that's been going on with your system.
I did not have utero issue.
You didn't, but the fact that the birth trauma was what's happening when you can talk about, like, so let's say if someone had a cord wrapped around their neck or this, that, and the other, that's still something that happened during that stage, right?
Oh.
So I'm not saying that you had a stroke in utero, but you're you had complications coming out of the uterus into the real world. And so you have to look at that in a reference frame of where it's going to fatigue you.
Interesting point.
Yeah, a lot of people think utero is like arthrogryposis, genetic stroke in utero, those kind of things. But again, cord wrapped around the neck, baby not moving much during the last process, preeclampsia. These are still your house is being affected, where you are developing, and then how you're coming out. So again, this is where you have to look at it as this is a scale and how you're looking at it. Yeah, I'm not here to say, oh, this is all because of hospital time and that's why the child isn't developing well. Because every child, when they're special needs, it depends on where these traumas have hit into the system, where you're going to have more severities. And this is where we get into what you were talking about too. What kind of recovery do you have?
Recovery is not simply resting. It is my body rebuilding enough energy and organization so I can participate again. That process often takes longer than people expect. Even after resting, I don't always immediately return to full capacity. I need time to ease back into activity because my system has to recalibrate and re-engage.
Right. And that re-engagement is really important because, like, again, what I just went through, or what you've went through, a lot of parents go, "Oh, my baby's been through so much. I'm just going to hold them." No, like, or they'll tell me, like, "Michelle, you've just been through so much. Just you're overdoing it. Just take it easy. Just lay there." I'm like, "No, guys, I need to move. I don't want to lay here. I don't want the metal in my hip to realize it doesn't have to move with my body." I get it that I do have to rest and work around this fatigue management, but I have to watch it in the same thing. And this is where I always say when I'm doing a Facebook review, or like I'm saying now, there's medical and there's movement. They have to work together. But a lot of people are waiting for the diagnosis and they're not looking at the movement. And this is a problem.
Is that why they say infusion can take up to 8 weeks?
Oh yeah, I think they don't see the heaviness of the system. First of all, we have to look at again when you're doing your infusion for iron. Okay, what are the hierarchies? What's it doing for your cognitive? When you're severely anemic, you don't process well, you're tired, you're fatigued, harder. So again, what's that going to do? The weight of the system, how it's going to affect your major organs because a functional movement goes through all your major and minor organs. So if your major or minor organs get a little bit inflamed, processing all the new iron that's going through, like if that inflames the kidneys a little bit, that means your functional movement or your posture, you might feel like, oh, like sitting up, those kind of things are affecting your system. And they all come into play. But if you realize that, like, oh, my kidneys are like in my posture and I'm trying to do that, so maybe I'm getting like this, that's the whole point, that once that's gone and passed, now this might be a quote habit that you feel more comfortable this way because the body doesn't want to feel bad. It really doesn't, and it will avoid it. But you have to, in some cases like this in recovery, where they say no pain, no gain. I get it, but you can't avoid, like I know my hip's gonna hurt, let's say if I move it, especially after the surgery, but I got to go to the bathroom. So,
Yeah.
I could have had the machines on me. They tried that, and I was like, "Oh, you got to figure out how to get me to the bathroom. There's no way I'm doing this." So,
Mhm.
and because I just couldn't do it. So, or I didn't want to, but I had to move to do it. But in some people, this is where kids aren't potty trained, let's say, until they're, or ever because of these kind of situations. So I'm just trying to spin a new light on this. Is the body just too fatigued to get up to go to the bathroom versus the child having sensory issues and not having to go to the bathroom that way?
Over time, I've learned to recognize fatigue earlier and pace myself more effectively. Adaptation for me is about sustainability, not pushing beyond my limits.
Also, I'm going to deviate a little bit here. Kay said something very important. Kay's life, or my son's life, was around therapy. Now, Kay was very lucky that part of therapy was horses, and she said, "Oh, this is pretty cool," and sticks with it. So what would have been probably a fatigue on a pony is now where she can handle high end, and this is where people, maximize or they perfect their skills. Our kids go through so much therapy that to a lot of our kids, this stuff isn't fun. One of the
No.
things, And so when it's not fun, it's fatiguing. It's like going to physical therapy, and I'm not picking on physical therapy. I'm just using an example. To some kids, you might as well be going to the doctors. I don't want, I don't want to go. But you also see it. I did karate for both my boys are black belts. I'm almost one. I'm a red belt with black stripe. But you know what I mean? Like I see so many parents. Oh, he didn't want to come today, so you know what? We're just quitting. I'm like, no, this is where you have to be a parent and get the child past that I don't want to stage, and this is hard stage, and this is fatiguing stage, this is a lot of work stage into, hey, this is pretty cool. And for some people that this is pretty cool doesn't happen. I could take a child for horse therapy and they're allergic to horses or they're afraid of heights. There's other variables, not just the horses, that will stress out or fatigue a system. And this is what we're trying to get into here.
Helmet required.
Right. Um, and but again, if you didn't like doing the horses, it would be a lot more fatiguing on you to still keep up with it at this stage.
My movement development has always influenced how much energy I use. Each stage builds on the last, and inefficiencies at any level can increase fatigue later in life.
Right, and this is what this scale is. Now, most people don't know the difference between habilitation and rehabilitation. Habilitation is when you don't know movement. So a child goes through habilitation. The world is new to them and they're going through new skills. Now, me, I just blew out my hip. So now I'm in rehabilitation. I'm learning how to do the skills I've already done before. Again, now there's also this impossible stage. You're asking a child, right, to go through stages of development or do things that's out of their realm. When it's out of their realms and they've never done it before, it's not that they can't do it, they don't even know how to do it. And so it's sort of like taking a child that barely can sit up independently and you're putting them in a walker. Even though you want them in a walker, I want them in a walker, you want those skills, you still have to work on the stages of development in their therapy to get them to their walker. Because if they can't get in and out of standing, they're not walking. And it's the same thing that they'll judge me right after surgery. Can she stand up? Can she sit down? Okay, once we have those two functions, okay, now their chances of walking have just increased. But if I'm just sitting on the chair, there's no one pulling my heavy body up into standing without my involvement and then expecting me to walk. Because it won't if I can't handle getting up into standing, I can't walk. Right. So now we're looking at what's impossible for the system, or we mentioned a little girl writing or reading, versus being capable in a system, right? Just because you didn't go through all the stages of development, you still might be capable of speech or reading or those types of skills. You might not be able to use a walker. And then again, the adult and the mature, right, is again, now we're around much more pain management, which you will probably have. I don't think they probably worked on you as much with pain management when you were a kid as now it's much more of a consideration, maybe because you're an adult. But my son was in horrible pain for years. Since he was 2, I brought him into the hospital and they sent me home saying we don't treat fussy babies. And he had a massive Haemophilus influenza infection. And when they finally found it, they're like, do you know how much pain he was in? I'm like, am I on glue? Like, go look at your hospital records. I've been taking him in saying my kid's screaming for days. But again, when kids don't have a language skill, they can't articulate these areas of I can't do it, it's impossible, fatigue, whichever. This webinar hopefully is getting you to think about different aspects of like, wow, I get it. That's why Johnny gets really cranky at 6 o'clock because he's just fatigued, not because he's got social emotional problems.
My development didn't happen in isolation. Earlier movement patterns still affect how much energy I use today, even in simple daily activities.
Oh, I agree. That's why I said the one stage that I lost during surgery is my locomotion stage, which is my crawling stage. When I'm okay to crawl, meaning I can bend my hip past the 90 degrees. So it's at the 6 weeks post-op. I'm getting on my bed and I'm crawling on and off of it. And a lot of people go, you're funny. And I'm like, no, this is why senior citizens, they fall down. Good luck getting them up because they're, the movements that we've had our whole life should always be there, right? Humans are very like riding a bike or getting on it. Like I haven't ridden a horse in a while. Like I could do it. It would be natural to me, but again, where are we adaptive? Chronic pain, restricted mobility, compensation, progressive degradation, right? This is the area, me as an adult, and also you too, because you're an adult, you don't want to walk down those roads, right? A child stress goes to when the movement is prevented or function can't be established. That's why the terrible twos when the kid's going because you're preventing something from happening, whether it's buying a teddy bear or letting them go run, jump on the bed, they get very upset.
Changing positions or tasks takes planning and effort. What looks automatic for others often requires active coordination for me.
Well, right, like you're getting a whole new wheelchair, sorry to go off topic, and you have to when you're getting fitted, right? And they can't tell this right away when you're getting like a travel wheelchair or any like you might feel great today, but you might realize 3 weeks from now, oh, I don't sit well, right? I've got to compensate. All these things start to come in adaptive technologies. This is the page that you have to look at. It's not just your sleep time or your pain. It's what you're working around. Even your whole house, your dad built for you. But if you were to move tomorrow, your fatigue rate would go through the roof. Or if you were, and that's why a lot of kids don't want to move out of the house because they're used to being able to get around.
Even when we would go camping.
Oh yeah, and that's the hardest thing too with parents. Parents have to go through a lot of fun stuff with their kids. But someone might like ballet, someone might like horses. You have a whole bunch of sisters. They all do different things, but a cool parent is adaptive to the child's needs and what that they want in life. And guess what? And that child can just say one day, I don't want to do this anymore. And you're like, what? You just put 10 years into it.
And a cool kid is adaptive.
A cool kid is adaptive also because the parents are cool. You know what I mean? This is where the village is there, or that one teacher that just hits it out of the park for you, and your life changes because you saw a subject differently. There's so many different times in our lives that are amazing that way. And for some it's not amazing, and they've had a really hard life for that reason. They didn't get to go to finish high school or they were in a foster system. This is not just about special needs per se. The system needs to go through certain things, and if it doesn't, it's stressful, it's fatiguing. So, and this is where I've really put together the 5 stages of movement, and they'll continue. Now you could use these 5 stages on the financial markets. This is you're just learning about money. This is where you can put money. You might have a banking account, transitions. Now you've got a debit and a credit card. Now locomotion. Oh, I can buy something for my future self. I can buy something from Amazon. Stuff moves. An acquisition. I'm getting a house. So these 5 stages are not just of development. They show up in many different aspects in our lives. But for a child, if a child does not go through these properly and transitions into each stage, we're going to have a fatigued life, right? And we think of going up, and I'm going to just cover this briefly, but it's the going down that's the thing is, again, we go from horizontal to vertical, then we're going in and out of horizontal to vertical. Now we're taking off an acquisition, but this is the one that's the problem, right? There's horizontal complications. If your child is gaps right here in the transition stage, you've got a child that's going to have global delays, right? They cannot transition here. If they get to here, you're still going to look at severe to global delays where they can get from horizontal to sitting on their own, let's say. But again, that link is broken. Right. And then again, now you're looking at again, still severe to global because they can't transition. This is where a lot of kids are rolling to their belly and trying to push up versus going from sitting to all fours. But now if they haven't learned movement and acquisition, this is where you've got still the severe to development to moderate to developmental delays where they got there and they're walking, and that's where a lot of people are confused, let's say with autism, but my kid walks. Yeah, we got to look at the whole picture, and they don't understand that acquisition to self to locomotion, and that's where you see those kind of complications.
Using a gait trainer allows me independence, but movement still requires significant energy and careful pacing throughout the day.
Oh, absolutely. But part of it is too, like the gait trainer, there's a transitional skills. Getting in and out of the gait trainer, I would assume, or your walker, that people have to help you get into position. Right. So that's what I'm trying to say is a lot of people go after the milestones, but it's the transition skills that really can cause the fatigue and the thought processing, the load negotiation on the system, so much more.
Using support helps me function, but it does not remove effort. My body is still actively working even when supported.
In most cases, when you're using support, it automatically is telling the world you need more effort. If I have to walk and hold on to the walls, or I still use the cane, things like that, it takes more effort versus me just getting up and right now I can't even think about running, let's say. And I know that seems trivial to some people. But I'm talking about how to recognize the stages. I don't mean to be insensitive to anybody's needs. But I really, when they said my son would never walk or talk, this is why I needed to know why, and this is why I break this stuff down so hard. So yes, if your child is in the horizontal stage, they're physically and cognitively fatigued, that they're not transitioning into vertical. This is where I just saw it post. Oh, my child's doing so well. They're 8 months old. They are starting to crawl, but funny thing is they just started to get rolling over, but the crawling is an army crawl. The child's 8 months old and still in a horizontal stage, not transitioning. And I get it that parents see locomotion or doing things the hard way. But if you're rolling after a quote crawl, but even army crawl is not a true crawl, the child is really in trouble. And I want to catch this at 1 month of birth that the child might need an assistant. Think of these more as clues to development versus what's wrong with the child, right? But if you're not getting the horizontals, you've got midline failures, you've got transitional failures, you've got transitional delays, global system delays. This is where if a child can't get out of this position, warning should be up to your community.
Fatigue can start earlier than people expect. Even small inefficiencies in development can lead to higher energy use throughout life.
Right. And Kay is talking about a really big warning sign. If your baby needs to be woken up to be fed, woken up to have social time, these are you're now in fatigue warnings. And this is where you start looking at the whole picture and like, oh, you're right. They're not getting the tummy time. They're not getting my child is lying around and not moving much. Please speak to your doctor. Vertical stage. The reason we're placed into independent sitting around 5.5 months, where you can be propped up And that's when a child should start bouncing and so forth. It's a big, you've gone for your horizontals, your verticals, and then you'll start going in and out, right? But again, is there a transitional delay? So propped sitting against the pillows, and lack of head support, baby should, this is not independent sitting. It's the qualities that you're looking for here. Again, midline failures. At independent sitting, clappy, clappy, coming to midline, can grab an item, crossing midline, a convergence with the eyes, these are all very important. And when a child usually has visual issues, the vertical issues are really start to stress out. You'll start to see that.
Holding my body upright requires constant adjustment. That ongoing effort contributes significantly to daily fatigue.
Right. And you're also negotiating much more than I am. Do not fall. Right. I can go like this. I don't, please, I'm not being insensitive. I'm not worried about falling. If you're going over like that, you're bracing for impact. And when the fall is actually happening, guys, I don't care if it's you or me, you're not strong enough to stop fall. So that's where again, and that's how also shows how intelligent Kay is, because her negotiation skills are superior to most people. And so that's where one of the benefits are what she's learned in life. And that's why she's so talented the way she is.
When multiple systems are working at once, movement, communication, pain, and cognition, fatigue increases quickly and becomes harder to manage.
Yeah, and anybody, if you can't transition, and this is a big stage, being in sitting and then going into all fours versus lying down, rolling over, and pushing up, that's a completely different phenomenon. If you're pushing up into all fours, you're bypassing this whole area. And this is where it's a big warning sign to me with lots of autism. I'm not saying it's a diagnostic tool, but these are areas when people are looking for the milestones versus for what's actually going on in their system. And since they're taking away a lot of the milestones, like the next section here with locomotion, crawling is not a milestone under the US government. So they're bypassing these clues that parents should be looking for.
Movements that require rotation or shifting positions are not automatic for me. They require focus and energy, even when they look simple.
Yeah, when you have midline collapse going from the shoulder to the elbows, right? So what joints are is they bring energy away from the body. And now the elbow or lever joint always goes from a single bone system to a two bone system. And that's where that rotation can happen. So when you have midline interruption, right? What people say is spasticity, it doesn't matter what the cause is. That's where the rotation really breaks down in the body. And again, creates a lot more energy because now you need torque to do something in a lot of ways versus having that freedom of rotating.
I have the most trouble with the in-between tone.
Right. When transitional skills are a problem, the tone is either active or it's passive, right? With more typical, and I hate to use that word, but more typical development, I should be able to have active muscles, like if I'm holding this cup, but yet I have passive muscles and so forth. I don't have to put all my effort into holding the cup, right? I can isolate my movements. And again, that's where it's fatiguing. So for you to hold up a cup, it's like you're trying to pick up a car, you know what I mean? Like because your whole body's putting all the effort into it.
Yeah.
And that's where your fatigue management comes into play. So if you're going in, especially if you're learning new skills or if you have to hold on, holding is the hardest, I think, most fatiguing for kiddos that have or people that have neuromuscular issues. I don't care if it's a toothbrush, it's a spoon. When you're looking into holding, that's when fatigue usually just goes really high in areas of movement management, because it goes all the effort goes into the hold, and you lose the posture. Like if I'm holding onto a cup, now you're saying, "Okay, fix your posture." You're going, "I'm holding the cup." You know what I mean? So if my posture starts to go, I either have to manage up, you know what I mean, to fix my posture and so forth, or both are going. And again, I think this is what I wanted to do this webinar to talk about it for parents to start to see like, oh, that's why I have such a hard time doing homework with my child. It's not the homework, it's the holding of the pencil. Maybe you want to do the homework without the pencil and go through the homework and then go back and do the homework again, maybe with the pencil. Let's say as an example for your child.
There are times when endurance becomes the limiting factor, not motivation. My body determines how long I can continue.
Listen, anyone who's doing what you're doing, college, horses, working, social media, and so forth, I'm not worried about your momentum, and your endurance. You're doing more than most people that are complaining, I'm bored, there's nothing on TV, and you know what I mean, and you're doing all of this. So your intelligence factors through the roof, and so is your momentum. That's never a question. But someone still is who's working with you and you have amazing family, they have to realize that at some point in your day, you're just like, I'm done, because you're just fatigued out, and that's okay. It has nothing to do with your momentum or intelligence.
They know.
Right. And this is where too, you'll see a big stress. It's the acquisition that you finally get to that point where it's like, I did it. Oh, you know what I mean? Like, I'm done. Instead of, and that's where kids, they get to that stage and then it's like, oh, I can walk. I can start climbing this here. And then they're already ready for the next round of stages of development. Whereas again, that, like, okay, I'm pulling to standing, but I'm good because I'm standing, but I can't get out of standing. And that's where you see the falling down and those kind of things. Parents have to be more helicopter parents, where they're watching their child's balance and locomotion because they're there. They pulled to standing, and pulled to standing is not a milestone in my world. It's getting in and out of standing, because getting in and out of standing, you can still play with a toy and play with your vision versus just holding on for dear life. That's a big difference.
Learning and communication become harder when I am fatigued. My ability to process, focus, and respond depends heavily on how much energy I have available.
But that's for everybody, but more so, but your life is around fatigue management versus for somebody else, fatigue might sneak in or show up, or like when a kid's like all of a sudden at the end of the day, I'm not tired. Usually that's the most tired kid in the car. And you give them a bath, and then again that the light bulb just goes and now they're ready for bed. But if you listen to I'm not tired and go, okay, you can stay up another half hour, that's usually your danger sign. And they get into the meltdowns and the screaming, and because they can't manage their life. But they're not at a point. You're at a point in your life where you can say, I'm tired, I'm done. Where a child, a younger kid, and even some adults don't know the signs of when to say, I'm done.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to go and look at the horizontal instabilities. What you're looking for is, and I won't read the whole slide, but the floor-based organization is very important to your child. So look for respiratory struggles, lack of head control. Then yes, your baby's not going to have head control at the first day of birth. I get it. But still in tummy time and so forth, you'll start to see the organization of it or the lack of it. Are they laying down and their head just can't get off the ground? Tone. Tone, a lot of people aren't looking for, but that high tone, the spasticity or that low tone, these start to show up, especially if the reflexes aren't integrating. This is very important. Visual alignment. When your child's doing a milestone, their eyes stay on the prize. When you're starting to see where the eyes go down, they're crossed. These are things to start really looking at. Again, that inability to lie down.
Is drooling control considered in this?
So drooling is very interesting, and we can actually do a whole podcast on this because I've written papers on it. Drooling is a number one sign of vestibular. So the reasons baby have very thin liquid in their nasal cavities and they do drool is because when they're rolling around, just like if I had a glass of fine wine and I was swishing it and I'm looking for the sugar or the legs of the wine. So when I'm rolling around and I'm in tummy time and all of that, my nasal cap, that's how I get my spatial orientation because my mucus is going around my body. Now I'm an adult. I can go like this and I don't have drool coming out of my mouth and my nose. Now, excuse me if I was maybe had a stroke, Bell's palsy, but also if I was drunk or impaired, doing drugs. You might see a drool because that's showing that the vestibular system's been hit somehow, and it's a really good sign. You'll see some drooling around teething, but if a baby has drool issues, and it's such a shame because I see a lot of people doing Botox and so forth when they're not dealing with that this is a vestibular hit and the vestibular system. Yeah. Yeah, if you have vestibular issues, I can tell you right now, it's obvious because by the drool, your thinner liquid in your mouth, your saliva, that's your brain saying, I need a vestibular. I'm still working on it, and so the mucus is thinner. But if I have a vestibular system, then the mucus is fine. And again, like we mentioned, transition failure, when your baby cannot transition from horizontal to vertical stage. This starts happening with grabbing the feet, a really big milestone, but very overlooked, right? Lack of binocular vision in the vision, meaning the eyes are not working together because convergence happens at this stage. Midline, the chest, pelvis, and they all come into if there's midline collapse. These are really big warnings, and they're not in most books. So we're getting into stage 2. Are you vertically sitting, independent sitting by 5.5 months, or are you vertically propping? There's lots of seats and devices and so forth. Just because your child's in a car seat or in a bouncer and so forth, that's not sitting. That is not independent sitting. And so you'll see the knees tend to bow out, right? They need to be propped. Vision looks to the right or the left, but they're not getting that convergence, right? If you follow, they should be converging, right? Clappy, clappy, convergence. And again, still having that inability to lie down. That's where I see a lot of misinformation and like sleep area, swaddling, because my baby, what they should be addressing is why isn't the baby lying down properly to sleep versus trying to constrict the baby in a swaddling at 5 months just really it might be necessary to get the child to shut its system down to sleep, but it's a big red flag. This is where tone shows up. If you didn't think you had a tone issue, because remember, babies are not born with ataxia, dystonia, spasticity. That comes at this stage of life where you start seeing that because they're trying to balance or for whatever reason, where you're starting to see that either the high tone or the low tone. So this area of looking for transition failure is very big in the pediatric world.
Does everyone have tone variations?
Everyone will have tone variations usually when they're doing something new. This stage right here is police testing. right? If they pull you over and they want to know if your system's impaired, all the testing they're doing right there, what are they asking you to do? Put one foot in front of the other. That really shouldn't show tone variations. Point to your nose, right? When they're doing all of those kind of things, those are tone variations. And this is really used in adulting to see a breakdown in the system if there's tone variations. Um, um, but at one point in someone's life, you're never going to be strong enough. I might be able to, let's say, like before, I could do calf raises at 130 pounds. I'm dropping down to 50 pounds because I want to make sure both feet are even. I have even through the pelvis. I don't want to push the muscle to show tone or variation to the left, which is stronger at the moment or more secure. And so I've dropped the weight down. So, but at some point, even if I do 130, if someone put calf raises at 200 pounds, can I do it? No. I mean, I've got tone issues. So tone issues will be a max out, being able to get in and out of the equipment. But I pay attention to that in my life, just like I'm showing you this, and you might think it's just for the babies. This is for Arnold Schwarzenegger. All of these things that I'm showing you I don't care if you're 85 years old or if you're two. These should be present in a system in a healthy way, right? But fear is a bigger thing. If you're afraid, you got tone issues. Oh my gosh, like I don't, what's going to happen? And so that's where you get the flight or flight, right? That now you can have superseding tone issues into the body. So it is something to be watched, but as possibly a warning sign. Because fear can come and go. I mean, I could be scared, and then today I'm like, oh, I'm fine. Why was I? I was so afraid of getting staples out yesterday. I was a baby. I didn't sleep. I was horrible. Of all the things I've done, I couldn't do those staples. I was a wreck. But now that it's over, I'm like, okay, I did it. I can breathe now. So, but she wanted to know if I wanted to stand up and have my state. I was like, unless you want me passing out on this floor, I said, I'm laying down, because I knew my body. I don't know why I was being such a baby, but it is what it is. So it's stage 3. Can't combine those horizontal and vertical. That's a big one. I might be able to sit. I might be able to roll over. Can we combine them? Coming up to sitting, getting in and out of all fours. Rolls to belly, pushing up, like I mentioned. Vision looks to the floor, getting in and out of the floor. Can they do these things? You really have to.
Why would you want to stand?
That's what I'm with you. Why would you want to stand? I'm a 180-pound woman. I'm going down. I'm going down. You just hip recovery. I was shocked that was even an option.
Yeah.
But I was thinking more like fainting. So not even standing instability. But if she goes to take a staple out and I go to jump, like, oh, there's no jump. Like, I don't know. I was a baby. I can laugh now, but yesterday my tone was different than today to answer. Again, these transition areas, when you're going from the into the locomotion, you're very high risk of now going into overcompensation. Babies shouldn't overcompensate whatsoever. It shouldn't be in their language. If they're that's what I used to hear from my son. If he was just a little bit stronger. Well, he's not. This is why I'm here. Like there's no strong. But
Should anyone?
overcompensate, you can only overcompensate or compensate when you understand gravity and 2 or more forces of movement. So let's say I have momentum and push pull. So I'm opening a doorknob, but I can handle a doorknob fast or with weight, like some doors are heavy. But I understand gravity. That's when I have comprehension and compensation skills, meaning I go to open a door. Oh, this door is heavier. I have to adjust, right? Now, again, when someone is having problems with those forces of movement, they go to open a door. Guess what? The door like literally knocks them over, or they can't open it. Now they need 2 hands, and now they become unstable, right? So again, the examples that we can give are thousands, but what I'm trying to say is what is the structure behind it? And so when I realize that I can push this phone a little bit harder or heavier, or I can throw the phone, now I'm like, well, throwing the phone's not a good idea. Those are comprehension and compensation skills. But when a baby is just tugging and won't release, that's overcompensating. That's not a good sign. But a lot of people go, look how strong my baby is. Or there's a viral video where they tied balloons up to a baby and they're like, look at this baby move. And I'm going, oh my gosh, quit making a special needs kid. because that's just, they shouldn't be trying to get away from these balloons. Stage 4. So locomotion, this is the crawl. This is where you really start to see the collapse of movement, right? You cannot push up into all fours and crawl at the same time. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work at the gym. I can only plank for 2 minutes. I'm strong, but when I start to plank, that's a gym move. I'm not saying babies never plank. I'm talking about being able to get in and out of it. My vocabulary starts to decrease. I can't talk, I can't breathe, and finally I collapse, right? You can't push. They reach for an object and they drop, right? Which again, they can get away with when they're on their belly, but Kay and I or you don't want to reach for an object and then drop. I mean, that's 5 feet. Vision looks again to the floor, language strain. These all really start to show up in this area because, as Kay mentioned, when the system's fatigue, if you're trying to army crawl, you're not talking mama, dada, you're not learning a vocabulary. The brain is saying we can get from point A to point B, but we're not talking.
Was it before hip compensating?
My hip was I was compensating big time before surgery. And that's why too, like, you can't look at me under standard, like, oh, she was fine. It wasn't like I fell down and broke my hip. My hip probably should have been replaced like at least 2 to 3 years ago. So, I'm golfing around this, I'm fishing, I was doing things, but I was doing it so I wouldn't be in pain. So, but it got to the point where every movement I was making was in pain. So now I'm again the overcompensating because the brain doesn't want to be in pain. The brain will protect itself. Your body's very intelligent. It doesn't want to do things it can't do. And this is why, like this transition failure, going from locomotion to acquisition, this is huge because falling from pushing up and falling down, that's no big deal. But when you're actually standing up and you're looking down, you're going, oh, I can fall down to that. Now, babies have diapers and they're a little bit, younger and they can get away with that. But there's that one moment where they go too far or they fall down, and worse, this is what my son used to do, is fall and hit his head. Guess what? Then they won't stand. Not
Was
because they
2 minutes plank before hip compensating?
I was doing those things even in pain. I mean, I was overcompensating. But if you're looking at compensating, there was probably an area where I didn't. My work up until hip surgery, if I was at the gym, I did about 150 push-ups a day. So I would do a superset, let's say of cables, and then I would do 10 push-ups. Now I didn't get to the floor. I was pushing up maybe off of a workout bench, so I was about this far. But right now, I can't get to that level without compensating the hip. So now what I could have done 2 weeks ago or a month ago of a push-up, I can't even entertain it until I'm structurally sound. So this is why I'm trying to talk about these levels of fatigue. Most people are saying, I can't do it because I don't have a hip. Well, now I can't do it because I'm recovering from surgery, even though my hip is now structurally sound. I still can't do it because of I have tissue that's still repairing and I don't want to pull a socket out as this because it's all metal and getting into my system. So these are all types of different variations of compensation. But to make a blanket statement of someone's overcompensating, that's where I'm like, but why are they overcompensating? Are they overcompensating because they need glasses and they don't have depth perception and their vision is off? Are they over? That's where my brain goes, and that's why I don't sleep much because I'm always, and that's why I wanted to do this webinar to show us how many just different facets of life came into play for fatigue. So it's not that Kay's just saying I'm tired or I'm saying I'm tired. We're saying it because we're done. There's a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, when you're going into pulling and falling versus getting in and out of standing, this is huge, right?
Mm.
This is huge. And we see with grandma. Grandma, just try harder, but watch your balance. What? No, they're going like, I fell down once. That's why also two guys with a fallen hip, there's an 85% of 1 year that you're going to die. 85% of just a fallen hip, and they can't.
Whoa.
Yeah, and they can't understand it with science. And I'm like, this whole webinar is explaining why. If you don't go back and address these areas of your life and make them stronger, the body just basically says, I don't have a leg to stand on. I can't keep going. And that's what breaks down. I was lucky again. My hip was broken, but it was breaking because of structural pressure. And then my hip had to be replaced. So I have wires in as well as the artificial hip. And so, and you can go on my group and see what I did. But that's where, but I'm working on what I'm lecturing on right now has been my rehab. And I want to go from, again, vision looks down. So if I go to get up or grandma's going to get up and they're there, where's the vision? Right? You don't do that on a motorcycle. But if you go to get up, your vision should be up. But I can't push and keep my eyes up at the same. That's very difficult to do. And that's where you see again how all these little areas of development intertwine with your child. And that's why when I do a Facebook Live review, I'm everything that I just talked about, my brain can see in 3 seconds. And then,
Boy.
no, I went to my doctor and they said the vision's fine. I'm like, no, it's not because the function's not there. If they're getting up like this already. I know we've missed milestones just by the push and the eyes going down. A baby walks into the room like they're like little gnats. They're like they know my inventory. And they're typical. They don't miss a trick. But a child with special needs, just that vision fatigue is just too much. Hands clutching, you'll see there. So again, this is compensation. So, but over time, compensation accumulates to stress, and that's what you're talking about. It's just you overcompensate so much that it's stress and fatigue from years, not just what happened this today. And but compensation is organized survival, and that's what people need to do. If you're compensating, it's to survive, whether it's survive of ease or survive of pain or survive of just keeping your respiratory. If you're not breathing well, you're not doing a lot. You're overcompensating by sitting more and so forth. So your breath can let me sit down and catch my breath. That some people live with that on a daily basis. That's a completely different form of compensation and fatigue.
Yeah.
Yeah. But thanks, guys. It was probably one of our longest podcasts. Hopefully, you'll see it's the most informative podcast. Take your nap after this, but I hope you're learning a lot from us on how the body works and can work or needs to work. Well, hopefully, we rocked your world.